all I can say. Anyway, I'm here and I have a question. I've only got one for today, so if you have a relationships question, please don't hesitate to send it through to elizabethroebuckjones.com/ask. All right, I have a question. I am needing, it's called How Can I Find Closure? I hope you can't hear all that noise. I am needing help in moving on and gaining closure without him actually giving it to me. I was in a relationship with an extremely toxic man. If you can't hear me, just put I can't hear you and I'll work something out. I'll have to move or something. I don't know where, but anyway, I'll work it out. I was in a relationship with an extremely toxic man that showed signs of a narcissist. Along with his own mental health issues he refused to acknowledge. We'd have wonderful moments together, and when things got serious, he'd pull back and make up an excuse of why we shouldn't continue, and I stupidly stuck around. He'd call me names and manipulate things and make me second-guess myself. I fell in love, however, and ignored the red flags. Last time I saw him, he told me he loved me for the first time in person, and we had a good, deep conversation about his past. He also accused me of lying and cheating, which never occurred. Later that night, he blocked me off everything and sent an abusive message. Since then, I have tried to reach out, but it's made him more angry and more abusive, telling me he doesn't care, etc. I believe he ran because he was afraid of love and has serious commitment and trust issues. He was scared of how serious it was getting and has never experienced love before. He refuses to speak to me and said he never will again. My anxiety and depression has dramatically increased, and I feel I take one step forward and 3 steps back. Hi Candace, how are you? I'm not sure how to move forward from this. Someone who I thought was forever to turn around and treat me like I'm nothing. Oh, darling, I am so sorry that this has happened to you. It feels to me like you might have been caught. Hi, Rosemary, how are you? You might have been caught in this best behavior trap, that when we first meet somebody in a relationship, they're on their best behavior. And what can happen is we believe that best behavior is the real them. And so we can go around in like a toxic cycle of honeymoon, and then a build up as issues between us are not addressed, an argument, and then we sort of go off and pause and lick our wounds, and then one of us pursues the other. And you've talked here about you pursuing him and reaching out to him. And then, of course, if he accepts that, you have a honeymoon period, and then you go around the cycle again. What you've actually described in your question is going around the cycle within a matter of hours. Some people can go around the cycle in a day, a week, a fortnight, a year, 7 years. I had one client that took 7 years to go around the cycle. So the cycle is just a pattern, and it's a pattern that gives us a template for your particular relationship. So it's a useful thing to draw on a whiteboard and then, really dissect what's going on in your relationship. I hope you can all hear me. We've just had some kind of machinery outside carrying on. So if you can't hear me, please let me know and I'll move. Because the phone's a bit of a funny thing. It works out what it does and doesn't pick up. And often things I can hear, you guys can't hear, which is quite funny. All right. So you've said to me, I stupidly stuck around. And look, I really want you to really slow yourself down and realize that even strong, independent, intelligent, self-assured women can find themselves with a toad. Toxic men are so clever at hiding who they really are. And so you can find yourself falling in love with someone that is a pretend version of them. Because what they do is they repress all the nasty sides of themselves, particularly at the beginning of the relationship, because they know that if they showed you their true side, you would not want to be in a relationship with them. So it's very, very important that you realize that you've been trapped, and that, you know, it doesn't really matter whether you're, you know, that you're not stupid, that it wouldn't matter who you were, that this guy is expert at getting in under women's skin. So it's interesting, you've talked a lot about his you've said that you think he's got narcissistic personality disorder. I would say it could be that, it could be something else, it might be none of that. I mean, it's hard to know. Personality disorder is a really difficult thing to diagnose, and often people have aspects of many personality disorders. The DSM-4 that we use to classify people, that's really just for convenience, and it's used as a tool to describe... sorry, we just had a big bang on the roof. It's used as a tool to describe people's behavior, so that when people are, when psychologists and psychiatrists and doctors and everyone are all talking together, they're all using the same language. Now, the other important thing I want you to remember is that you need to be careful what you read on the web. As much as we love the web and all that kind of thing, and, you know, we need to be careful, because one of the things that a lot of people who are writing on the web do is they try to use combinations of words that make sure that their post or what they're writing about comes up in the news feed. And one of the things that has worked is the word narcissist and abuse. So people who perhaps do not have as much integrity as what they should have are using these two words to get traction in Google. Because any therapist will tell you, who is worth their salt, that a personality disorder, mental illness, whether it's depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, whatever it is, sits in one bucket and the abuse sits in another bucket. Just because a person has narcissistic personality disorder does not mean to say that they have abuse, that they are abusive. The other thing that I want you to be very careful about is that you're not minimizing his abuse by saying, oh, but he's depressed or he's anxious. Really important not to do that, because abuse is abuse, and a person can have depression or anxiety. Just because they have depression or anxiety does not mean to say that they are going to be nasty to you. They might be really revolting to live with and they might drive you crazy, but they're definitely not necessarily abusive. So, however, I do want to comment on this guy's behavior, and I do think you're right. There's something there, but we're just not sure what it is. And I certainly can't confirm it from your question, other than to say to you, you're thinking that there's something else going on with him along with his abuse. I'm wondering even if he's bipolar and he goes up on a high and then comes crashing down. And if his bipolar is particularly what we call labile, where the person goes up and down often within a very short period of time, that would really indicate that he could go up on a high with you and then come crashing down very quickly. And if he's not taking any responsibility for his behavior, he's going to hit out on you. So I would strongly recommend that you really hold on to that idea that his behavior is very entrenched. His reflexivity is not there. He's not looking in on himself. And so it's very unlikely that his behavior is going to change. And hi, Anna, how are you? And what you're seeing now, that's what's real. All the nice stuff, that's him repressing his reality. That's him being something he's not. So as hard as it is, I want you to really cling on to that space that he really isn't a nice person. And he really is impacted. He's allowing his mental illness or his personality to impact how he is in the world. And what that means for you is unless he's going to acknowledge all of these things and work very hard to shift them, nothing is going to change for you. So how can you move on from this relationship? Well, with great difficulty. I'm not going to give you a magic answer to all of this. But what I can say to you, gosh, that noise, I hope that you can all still hear me and it's not coming through the phone too much, is that it's likely you've been drawn into a relationship cycle. And we know that the nice parts of the relationship cycle, the pursuit and the honeymoon, you know, whether it's you pursuing him and him accepting your pursuit and moving into this beautiful space where everything seems wonderful, but nothing's resolved, is very, very addictive, because the bad parts of the relationship feed your poor self-concept, and the good parts of the relationship, he does love me after all. And I'm going to recommend 2 blog posts for you to read. One is called Are You Mistaking Intensity for Intimacy in Your Relationship, which I think explains the addiction of the arguing cycle. And also I think Relationship Patterns would be a good one for you to read as well. And I'm going to put both of those into the comments for you to click on and read. So how do you move past this when you've got this, when you're sort of even being drawn back in? Well, the problem is that the end of a relationship is actually worse than a death, because the person's still around. The relationship's ended, but the person is still there. And it is so hard to move on from, because even if you block him out of social media, the click of a button, going in through friends, Facebook accounts, all sorts of things, you can find out what's going on with him and you can find out what he's doing. So it is important that you instigate this no contact rule, so that you actually say, I am not going to contact you anymore. That's it. And cut off. It's a bit like cutting off an addiction. I want you to think about yourself. So I want you to really focus in on your self-care. Incredibly important. So I want you to think about whether you might need, you've talked about your depression, and I want you to understand that depression breeds depression, and I'm probably not telling you anything you don't already know. So depression basically, it feeds on itself. The more you can't leave the house, the more you don't want to get up out of bed, the more you don't exercise, the more you don't manage your diet, the more you will feel the effects of that, and the more depressed you will feel. So it may be helpful for you to go and see a GP or a specialist and get yourself some medication just to take the very edge off. I don't know if you're taking medication now, but that would be something that I would strongly recommend for you. Once the medication takes the edge off, that then makes it easier for you to then work on yourself and do the things you need to do to get well. Now, I don't want you to think that medication is the only answer. It's not. You really need to be thinking also about how you can get some support. So whether that looks like coming into our Facebook group and interacting with the girls and reading the other girls' issues in relationships and educating yourself, whether that looks like going to a meetup group. We're going to be starting a meetup group very, very soon for relationships and dating advice for women, which I'm very, very excited about. And I'm about to sit down and sort out all the dates, and then I'm going to be contacting the cafe where we're going to be running it, which I'm very excited about. So there's meetup, there's or other specific support groups that you might go to, so you can have some connection, and particularly you want to connect with girls that are in a like-minded space to you. Sometimes it's not helpful because you'll all sit and have a bitch session about how horrible men are, but sometimes it is incredibly helpful to really hear somebody else say, I've been where you are now. I've been really unwell. I have grieved an abusive relationship. I have felt crazy. It destroyed my life. And it can be very, very empowering to hear those things and be able to move on from that. I want you to think about looking after your temple. So we need lots of good food, we need some movement, whether you just go for a walk, whether you can do some more exercise than that. I strongly recommend that you start to do those sorts of things. And then the last thing is, I want you to be working on your own personal development. So what I want you to do is to be, if you can't sleep at night, I've got some, there's a blog post I'll recommend for you. If you've got difficulty sleeping, and that often happens with depression, you find yourself sleeping at the wrong time. You want to sleep through the day and then you're, wide awake at night. I want you to use a counting meditation in the evening. But what I also think would be very helpful to you, now there's a plane flying over. I kid you not, there's a conspiracy. Looks like a police chopper. I don't want baddies jumping into mind you, wouldn't that be exciting if I had a baddie go running past? Mind you, they'd be doing well to jump over my fences because they're very high. So I want you to think about getting yourself some podcasts to listen to at night when you're lying in bed. And I want you to lie in bed and recognize that even lying on your back in bed is rest. And I want you to get yourself some good podcasts where you can educate yourself. And there are so many TED Talks that you can get for nothing that you can listen to. But they don't necessarily have to be about abusive relationships. They can be about health. They can be about wellness. I've actually done some some Facebook Lives here in the group that I'm hoping to make available to you to listen to. And there is also, I'm going to be starting my podcast very soon, which you will be able to link into on my blog post, because I'll have the blog post and I'm going to embed the podcast into the blog post so that you can listen to it just plugging your headphones into your iPhone or your mobile phone or into your computer or whatever you want to do. And I want you to really look at educating yourself. Incredibly important, because the more you educate yourself, the less likely it is that you will be hurt like this again. Because when a guy comes into your life and he treats you like Prince Charming, there will be little indicators through the cracks, and you will see those indicators and you will be thinking twice about just how far you go into this relationship. I think there might be a baddie, because that chopper's circling, and it's circling right near me. No, we don't want baddies here. I can't see if it's a police chopper or not. Between that and whatever the machine is out in the street, I've had enough. Anyway, so that's my answer to your question. I hope it's helpful. I don't have a magic fix for feeling awful about what's happened to your relationship. I really don't. Other than to say to you that it is so important that you work on your own self-repair, that you do find a community of women who understand where you've come from, that you do seek help, if you need help from professionals, if it is that bad, that you do think about taking medication. Many clients, when I say this, will say to me, I don't want to take medication. But medication is not forever. Medication is therefore helping you get through a situation in your life that you have found incredibly difficult to manage. And it takes that edge off so that you can start to rebuild yourself. And then when you feel strong again, as you're working with the professional, whoever it is that's helping you with that, you start to reduce your dose. You never ever go off these things cold turkey, ever, 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 ever. Do you ever stop taking medication? You always go off slowly, slowly, slowly. And that's where, when you start to rebuild your life after an awful time that you've had, the time does come where you might say maybe I need a tiny dose of medication. And I've seen clients where they're saying to me, I cut my tablets up because they only need a little slither. But it's just enough to take that edge off. So, and a good professional will help you to find that lowest dose. And if it means that you can then start to rebuild yourself, then the medication is worth every single day that you take it. I want you to really, really think about that and how you can look after yourself, because that's your pathway out of it. And your education, incredibly important. My book, Stop Kissing Toads, I think would be incredibly useful for you. It's on my website. There are links there if you're overseas that you can purchase my book via the Book Depository or Barnes & Noble or one of the other sites. Thank you, Sarah. One of the other sites that's available, because if you order from my site and you're overseas, the postage will kill you. It's like as much as the book, and for a signed copy, that's, pretty sad. So I've got it. My book's available globally, and it won't be long. It'll be on Kindle, which of course makes it even cheaper and easier and more immediate to get it. I think you would find this very helpful in terms of recognizing the signs you need to be looking for right from the beginning about whether a guy's going to be toxic or not. And I think that's incredibly important for you. So I have come to the end of our question. I am going off to finish writing boundaries when he isn't listening. So of course, funneled in particularly for women to be able to communicate with their partners